The night was too quiet, like the city was holding its breath. Detective Alex Marlowe stood alone in the beam of a flickering streetlight outside an abandoned warehouse, his breath clouding in the cold air. The silence was shattered by the distant wail of a siren, a sound too common in this part of the city. He ducked under the yellow police tape and stepped inside. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and something else, something older. His flashlight beam danced over graffiti-smeared walls until it settled on the body. Same MO as the others. His voice echoed in the empty space. From the shadows, his temporary partner, Officer Daniels, emerged, nodding solemnly. Exactly the same, Marlowe. No signs of a struggle, body drained of blood, and those damn weird symbols. Marlowe knelt beside the victim, examining the symbols carved with unsettling precision. Ritualistic, he murmured, more to himself than to Daniels. Daniels snorted. You think this is some cult? Because last time I checked, cults weren't invisible. No one sees anything, hears anything. It's like these poor bastards just end up dead. Marlowe's gaze lingered on the symbols, not a cult. Something worse. He stood up, the old grief of his sister's unsolved case tightening his chest. This wasn't just another case. It was a repeat of the horror that had taken her, left in the dark just like this one, unresolved and haunting. If they're connected, I'm going to find out how. And this time, Marlowe said, his voice hard as the concrete beneath his feet, I'm not letting it go until I do. As he spoke, the beam of his flashlight flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. In the distance, something moved, a whisper of sound, like laughter. The night seemed to press closer, and Marlowe felt it then, the weight of unseen eyes watching. It started with a diary, old and worn, looking like it could crumble to dust if handled too roughly. Marlowe found it under a loose floorboard at the second crime scene, its pages yellowed and filled with frantic scrawls that seemed to pulse with urgency. Back at his cluttered desk, under the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights, Marlowe flipped through the diary. His eyes caught on a passage. It comes on the breath of the gods, devouring the despair of the damned. Daniels leaned over the desk, squinting at the text. Sounds like a load of old superstition to me. Maybe, Marlowe said, tapping the page. Or maybe it's the clue we've been missing. The next night, as Marlowe walked the shadowy streets near the latest crime scene, a sense of unease crawled up his spine. The city was different in the dark, alive with whispered secrets and hidden dangers. As he passed an alley, a shape detached itself from the shadows, a figure so pale it seemed to glow under the moonlight. Detective Marlowe, the figure called, its voice a cold whisper that raised the hairs on the back of Marlowe's neck. Who are you? Marlowe demanded, his hand instinctively going to his gun. A friend, the figure said, stepping closer. The moonlight fell on its face, revealing eyes too deep, too dark. I know what hunts in the shadows of this city. I know because it hunted me too. Marlowe kept his gun trained on the figure. What are you talking about? It's older than any of us, thriving on the darkness within, the figure said, its voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And it's growing stronger. With that, the figure slipped back into the darkness, leaving Marlowe alone with his thoughts and the chilling realization that this case was unlike any other. He stared into the night, the diary's words echoing in his mind, and knew he was facing something that might be beyond his understanding. But one thing was clear. The nightmare was just beginning. The city seemed to hold its breath as Marlowe pieced together the scattered clues, each one drawing him deeper into the labyrinth of the unknown. With each new victim, the creature's message became clearer. It was hunting, and humans were its prey. As Marlowe sat in his dimly lit office, poring over maps and crime scene photos, Daniels burst through the door, his face pale and his breath ragged. Another one, Marlowe. And it's bad. They found her just like the others, but this time, there's a witness. A witness. Marlowe snapped to attention, his fatigue momentarily forgotten. Yeah, Daniels replied, tossing a folder onto the desk. Says she saw the whole thing. Says it wasn't human. Marlowe grabbed the folder, his eyes scanning the witness statement. A chill ran down his spine as he read the description of a shadowy figure with eyes like black holes, disappearing into thin air. He looked up at Daniels. We need to talk to her, now. In a cramped, flickering lit interview room, the witness, a young woman with haunted eyes, recounted her tale. "It just appeared out of the shadows," she whispered, her voice trembling. It looked at me, and for a second, I felt like it was inside my head, feeding off my fear. Marlowe leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Did it say anything to you?" She nodded, shivering. It said, "The feast is only beginning." The words hung in the air, heavy with ominous portent. Marlowe and Daniels exchanged a glance. The detective felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This was no ordinary killer. It was something much, much worse. Armed with this new information, Marlowe decided it was time to confront the beast. He led a team into the heart of the city's old catacombs, the last place the creature was seen. The air grew colder as they descended, the darkness almost tangible. As they navigated the narrow, winding passages, a sudden screech echoed through the catacombs, freezing them in their tracks. The lights flickered, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, all at once, the walls seemed to pulse, and a figure emerged from the shadows, its form shifting, faceless, terrifying. Marlowe raised his gun, his heart pounding. "End of the line," he shouted over the deafening echoes. "Whatever you are, it ends here." The creature laughed, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You cannot end what has no beginning," it hissed, its voice a chorus of nightmares. "And I am far from finished with this city." With that, the creature lunged, and the catacombs erupted into chaos, a battle between light and an unyielding darkness. Marlowe fought with every ounce of his being, driven by a desperate need to protect his city, to avenge his sister, and to banish this horror back to the shadows from whence it came. The catacombs shuddered, as if the earth itself was trying to swallow the darkness whole. Marlowe, battered and breathless, clutched the ancient diary to his chest as he recited the incantations, the words a lifeline in the engulfing chaos. The creature writhed before him, its form flickering between this world and another, its screams piercing the air. "You cannot bind me, mortal," it roared, its voice a tempest of fury and fear. "I don't need to bind you," Marlowe yelled back, his voice steady despite the pandemonium. "I just need to slow you down." With the final word of the ritual spoken, a brilliant light erupted, searing through the caverns. The ground heaved and the walls began to collapse, sending stones tumbling down around them. Marlowe dove out of the way, debris nicking his skin, his lungs filling with dust. As the light died down and the echoes of the collapse faded, Marlowe staggered to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He looked around. The catacombs were now just a grave of rubble. There was no sign of the creature, only the heavy silence of a battle ended. Daniels emerged from behind a fallen beam, coughing and bruised but alive. Did we get it?" he asked, his voice raw. Marlowe didn't answer right away. He turned, looking back at the sealed entrance to the catacombs. "Maybe," he said finally, the weight of uncertainty in his voice. "Or maybe we just gave it a reason to hide." They made their way out of the labyrinthine tunnels, the night air crisp and eerily silent as they emerged. Marlowe's gaze lingered on the sealed entrance, the darkness beyond palpable and threatening. The city felt different now, like a brief respite in an ongoing war. As they walked back towards the flickering lights of their squad cars, Marlowe's hand tightened around the diary. A soft whisper drifted on the breeze, almost inaudible. He paused, straining to listen. The whisper came again, a shadow of a sound, but unmistakably the same voice as the creature's. Marlowe's eyes narrowed as he looked back once more over his shoulder. The whisper seemed to mock him, a reminder that some horrors were too deep to be fully vanquished. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath. A promise or a curse, he couldn't tell which. Daniels looked at him, concern etching his features. "What did you hear?" Marlowe shook his head, a grim smile playing on his lips. "Just the city," he said, turning away from the darkness. "Just the city telling us she's still got secrets." They drove off into the night, leaving the sealed catacombs behind, but the echo of that whisper lingered, a chilling note that the feast, perhaps, was only just beginning.